Merry Christmas. Christmas at Meck is, of course, a celebration of the birthday of Jesus, and it's an easy one to celebrate. But when it's personal, one of ours, birthdays can be kind of a bit of a mixed bag, particularly the older you get. We enjoy being celebrated, but we don't like getting another year older. In fact, some people will even lie about their age. I had a birthday this past Monday, and again, I don't know why people feel like they have to hide their age. I don't mind telling you exactly that I hit the big 3-0 times 2. I did hear about a little girl who visited her grandmother on her birthday, and she asked her grandmother how old she was. And she said, honey, when you're my age, you don't tell anybody how old you are. So the little girl snuck upstairs to her grandmother's bedroom and started to go through her purse because she was going to find the driver's license to find out how old she was. The grandmother came up the stairs, caught the little girl red-handed, and she says, what are you doing? And the little girl said, I'm looking for your driver's license because I'm going to find out how old you are. And the grandmother said, okay, what does it say? And the little girl looked at the license a minute, and she did some figuring in her head, and she said, Grandma, you're 76 years old. And she said, you're right, honey, I am. I'm 76. And then the little girl looked down at the license again, and she said, and Grandma, I won't tell anybody, but it also says you made an F in sex. We've been in a series these last few weeks around here that we've been calling Raw and Unfiltered, the real Christmas story. It's been a look at things that many people may not have known about the Christmas event, as well as things that are commonly believed but aren't really in the Bible. Today, I want to take just a handful of minutes and look at just one last thing about the birth of Jesus you may not have known. But before we do, let's kind of state the obvious. There really was a first Christmas. There really was a man named Jesus who was born. We're not talking about a legend or a myth. No scholar, no matter where they stand in relation to the Christian faith, denies that the man Jesus, the one the Bible talks about, existed. In fact, he's one of the most documented figures in all of human history. You find him listed in the writings of Thales, who was a first century Greek writer, Pliny the Younger, the Roman historians Tacitus and Suetonius, the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus. Of course, the most detailed account and record is found in the Bible, which contains, though not one, but 4 independent eyewitness biographical accounts written by the men Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So we know we're marking a real birthday of a real person. And we also know what it is that the Christian faith claims about this birthday. Let me read it. It says, that night there were shepherds staying in the fields nearby, guarding their flocks of sheep. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared among them, and the radiance of the Lord's glory surrounded them, and they were terrified. But the angel reassured them, don't be afraid. I bring you good news that will bring great joy to all people. The Savior, yes, the Messiah, the Lord, has been born today in Bethlehem, the city of David. That's the message of Christmas, of the Christian faith, that in Jesus you have God himself in human form, come to planet Earth on a rescue mission to save us from our sin and our relational separation from God. So what's the one thing I want to explore about his birth? That one last thing for this whole series. I want to explore the one thing about it that will make you think, really think about whether or not it's all true. The one thing about the birth that can help you determine whether Jesus was who he said he was. And it may surprise you what that one thing is. It's the prophecies about the coming of the Messiah. I don't know if you know much about those, but they're fascinating. Here's why they matter. If the Bible records prophecies given hundreds of years before Jesus, all about the coming of the Messiah, the Christ, and Jesus was that Messiah, then he would have fulfilled them. Every single one of them. And if he didn't fulfill them, even one of them, then either the Bible is a hot mess when it comes to prophecies, or Jesus was a hot mess in regard to being the Messiah, or both. But either way, it's a pretty quick and efficient test because there were prophecies, and anyone can know whether or not Jesus fulfilled them. Let me just give you 3 as an example. It was prophesied that when the Messiah was born, he would be a descendant of the house of David from the tribe of Judah and from the family line of Jesse. Jesus was. It was prophesied by the prophet Micah that the Messiah would be born in the small, obscure little town of Bethlehem. And though never planned by Joseph and Mary, the national decree of a census by the Roman government that forced the uprooting of thousands of people took Joseph back to his hometown, which was Bethlehem. And it was while they were there that Mary gave birth to Jesus. Well, one more. The prophet Isaiah proclaimed that upon the Messiah's birth, the Messiah would be presented with gifts, which obviously also happened through the gifts given Jesus by the Magi. Now, there's lots of ways you can engage this kind of stuff. You can say it's all coincidence. And no doubt, it would be easy to take anyone's life and line it up with some of the biblical prophecies and find some areas of common ground. The problem is that Jesus didn't just fulfill 3 prophecies. He fulfilled every single one. Specific prophecies made hundreds of years earlier about not only his birth, but his entire life, including even the events surrounding his death. How he would be betrayed for a specific amount of money, how they would cast lots for his clothing, and even how he would be put to death. For example, the prophet Isaiah said that he would be pierced as part of his death. And this was hundreds of years before crucifixion as a mode of execution was even practiced. All fulfilled in the life of Jesus. Now, the chances of that happening in a single life by coincidence are mind-boggling. Scientist and mathematician Dr. Peter Stoner, who was former chair of the Department of Mathematics and Astronomy at Pasadena City College and was later chair of the Department of Science at Westmont, worked on this with 600 of his students. And their goal was to calculate the odds for the detailed accuracy of just one biblical prophecy about the coming Messiah to have come true in the life of Jesus the way it did by chance. Eventually, they determined that the odds of such an event were 1 in 400 million. Well, then they went to work on the odds for 8 prophecies being fulfilled in the life of one person by chance. And for 8 of them to occur by chance, meaning it had nothing to do with him really being the Messiah, the odds went to 1 in 10 to the 17th power. Now, I want to show you what that number looks like. That's a 1 with 17 zeros behind it. That's for 8 to have happened by chance. But as I mentioned, you don't find just 1 fulfilled in the life of Jesus, much less 8. There are up to 332 distinct Old Testament prophecies concerning the Messiah, and all 332 were fulfilled in the life of Jesus. Now, for this to have happened by chance would be akin, it has been determined, akin to a person randomly finding a single predetermined atom among all the atoms in a trillion, billion universes the size of our universe. Coincidence just doesn't get you very far in explaining this away. Well, here's another way you can engage it. You could say, okay, but how do I know that the people who wrote the background and biographies of Jesus that we draw from today didn't alter the details of his life to make it look like he fulfilled all the prophecies? In other words, they wrote up a false report in order to make it look like Jesus was the Messiah and have people believe. Very fair and fair to explore. It's got a couple of problems, though. The first one is, why would a non-Christian Roman or Greek historian or a Jewish historian make up things to bolster Jesus who, and they were not Christians? Why would they make it up to try to help the Christian movement? In fact, they were opposed to the Christian movement. Another problem is when you look at the Christians who wrote the 4 biographies of the life of Jesus that you have in the Bible. When you look at that and you say, well, maybe they made it all up. Well, you only have the problem of why the Romans and the Greeks and the Jews did, but then when you look at the Christians, you got even more problems about why they would make it up. And we have evidence that they didn't. For example, the New Testament accounts began to be circulated within 30 years or so after the life of Jesus. Not that long, which means that people were still around who actually heard the teaching of Jesus, witnessed his life, and knew firsthand when all of this oral history became written history, they knew the details that they were writing about. They knew about his activity, his background, and his teaching. If the details had been altered or doctored up in order to fulfill specific, well-known prophecies that people who were alive at the time knew were bogus, the outcry would have been deafening. The Christian movement would have ended right there. It would have been the laughing stock and completely discredited. There was no outcry from the people who witnessed the events and heard the teaching of Jesus when these documents began to be circulated. And today, the Christian faith, obviously, is the largest in the world. And not only that, another problem is the writers of the New Testament were more than willing to die for their story. In fact, they did. There was great persecution of the early Christians. And as a result of that, there was a lot of persecution for the early Christian leaders. 11 of the 12 disciples of Jesus died martyr deaths. They tried to kill John, the 12th, but couldn't, so they ended up exiling him to the Isle of Patmos. They each were given a chance to change their story, to say that what they had witnessed or wrote about Jesus was just made up. They could do that and live. Or they could cling to their stories and die truly horrific deaths. They all went to their deaths with, hey, it's true. Jesus was who he said he was. He's Lord. That was on their lips when they went to their death. Now, we all know that people will die for what they believe to be true, even if it's actually a lie. You see that all the time. Now, what you don't tend to see is someone willing to die for what they know is a lie. So that's a hard sell. Another option is to say that Jesus himself intentionally met the requirements of the ancient predictions in order to make it look like fulfilled prophecy. He read up on all the prophecies and then purposefully ordered his life around fulfilling each and every one of them. Well, that actually might be possible for some of the prophecies. Some of them could be pursued through intentional actions by Jesus as an adult, but not for the vast majority. I mean, think about it. How could Jesus have orchestrated the place and events surrounding his birth, much less his own ancestry? How could he have dictated the manner of his betrayal or the exact manner of his death? Those things are beyond human control. So if the prophecies couldn't have been fulfilled by chance, the accounts of his life are authentic, and he couldn't have orchestrated it as a matter of intent, what's left? Well, there is one other option. Jesus fulfilled each and every prophecy made about the coming Messiah because he was indeed the fulfillment of those prophecies. He was who he said he was. He was the Messiah. There's obviously so much more about the life of Jesus to consider. The miracles that were widely recorded, the life itself that he lived that's considered to be the greatest, most noble, most virtuous of any life that has ever been lived. The teaching that has been the most life-changing and revolutionary in all of human history, not to mention the empty grave on the third day after his crucifixion. How you respond to all this is obviously your decision. A lot of very smart people have looked at the evidence surrounding the Christian faith and specifically the person of Jesus and walked away stunned. And not just stunned, but with head bowed and knees bent. For those of us in that category, and I would count myself a Christ follower, this isn't a cultural holiday. It's a spiritual holy day. What we're marking is deeper than presents and richer than lights on trees. For us, this is about a Savior who was born, the Lord, the Messiah. If that's where you're at, not where you're at spiritually, my hope is that you will be at least stirred, even with our short time together, just stirred to examine it all with fresh eyes and an open mind. Don't be content with what you think you know. Dig in and find out all that there really is to know. And don't get hung up on the junk you might have experienced in a dysfunctional church in your past or the people who claim to be Christians and who turned out to be flaming hypocrites. I hate all that too. But in truth, it has nothing to do with Jesus and who he said he was. The Christian faith isn't about a program. It's about a person. It's not about religion. It's about a relationship. You can explore that here at Meck for yourself and come to your own conclusions, even if your journey starts with a healthy amount of skepticism and doubt and distrust and cynicism. That's okay. That's the way it started off for a lot of us. I can't speak for every church, but I can speak for this one. This is a safe place to hear, see, experience, explore. No matter what your starting point might be. And I know it's not just intellectual baggage we can have, which is why this is also a safe place to bring junk and mess, everything you don't post on Instagram. It's a safe place to bring a marriage that's hanging by a thread, a child you have no idea what to do with, fears you've never voiced, insecurities you try to hide, addictions, unemployment, divorce, adultery, or just the raw spiritual confusion that so many of us have in this day. Whatever you bring to the table, you won't be the first to have brought it. We have a sign over whatever screen you're looking at right now, and we've had it there from day one. No perfect people allowed. That's what hangs over the door. Just sin-stained, messed up, question-filled, struggling with life people who are open to finding out how God can make a difference in their life. And I can't think of a more authentic response to Christmas than to start your own journey of exploration into who Jesus is and what he could mean for your life.